The death of Cleopatra. Death is an inevitable part of life. In fact, many argue that death is the only reality of life. Cleopatra's life was filled with disappointments and disasters. Just like all lives that lead themselves to poetry, she inherited an empire that was in danger while growing up in unequaled luxury. Her family, the Ptolemies, had ruled as pharaohs for 10 generations. She and her 10-year-old brother took over a nation with a troubled past and uncertain future. But before everything, here are some questions worth asking. But do you know who Cleopatra was? What was her history with Julius Caesar? What led to her demise? Stick with us till the end of this video as we unlock yet another mystery. And if you're interested in some amazing mysteries, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and explore our channel. Cleopatra was an intelligent woman who could speak several languages. Despite not being Egyptian descent, Cleopatra was the only one in her royal household to master the language. She had 3 co-regencies and was the dominating leader in each. She had a lasting reputation in history and popular myth due to her relationships and military alliances with the Roman generals Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Along with that, she was prominent for her alleged exotic beauty and seduction abilities. Astounded by her mesmerizing beauty, she was also declared to be the daughter of Re, the Egyptian sun god, to increase her power over the populace of Egypt. In order to maintain the chastity of their bloodline, Ptolemaic dynasty members frequently wed other family members. Cleopatra's parents were likely brothers and sisters, because more than a dozen of her relatives were married to cousins or siblings. Following this tradition, Cleopatra ultimately wed both of her young brothers, whom each functioned as her co-founder at various points throughout her rule. Days after, Pompey, Cleopatra's father, was murdered. Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, the Ptolemies' palace, Cleopatra's exiled home, where he locked himself. Meanwhile, Cleopatra planned a secret return from the desert, avoiding enemy lines and Roman barriers. She was successful to camouflage from the enemies and arrived in the middle of the night, hiding in a heavy bag. The gesture won over Rome's future dictator for life when Cleopatra emerged from the carpet, possibly looking a little bit messy but wearing her finest attire. How could Caesar resist her beauty for long? He agreed to help her and fought her brother's men over the next few months while she was pregnant with his child. Eventually, Caesar was victorious in defeating them and returned her to the throne. Even though Cleopatra gave birth to a son, Caesar was already married. An Egyptian tradition requires Cleopatra to marry the last of her brothers. To eliminate any challenges to the succession of her son, Cleopatra had her brother slain after Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC. She also executed her disobedient sister, Arsinoe, to firmly establish her hold on the kingdom. In addition to being a typical aspect of Egyptian power politics in Cleopatra's day, such cruelty was also required to secure her own life and that of her son. It was significant to her security. Cleopatra began the task of governing Egypt, the richest country in the Mediterranean region and the last to maintain its independence from Rome, once all domestic dangers had been eliminated. Even though Cleopatra tried to protect Egypt from all possible tragedies, natural disasters always remain an exception. Unreliable Nile floods caused crops to suffer, which in turn caused inflation and starvation. A second triad, comprising Caesar's friends, Mark Antony, Octavian, Lepidus, and his killers, Brutus and Cassius, were engaged in combat in Rome at the same time. Both parties requested Egyptian assistance, and after some hesitation, Cleopatra delivered the trio of 4 Roman legions that Caesar had already stationed in Egypt. After defeating Brutus's and Cassius's armies in the Philippi Wars, Mark Antony and Octavian split control between Rome. Cleopatra was shortly called by Mark Antony to Tarsus, a city in Turkey, to explain her part in the complex events that followed Caesar's killing. Cleopatra traveled to Tarsus in an elegant ship while draped in robes of Isis. Her beauty captivated Antony, who identified with the Greek deity Dionysus himself. He promised to defend Egypt and Cleopatra's throne in exchange for helping having her younger sister and rival, Arsinoe, who was then exiled and removed from power. Even though some modern historians have presented Cleopatra as a competent, well-liked Egyptian leader, others typically picture her through Roman lenses. Roman propaganda, much of which came from her rival, Octavian, depicted Cleopatra as a dangerous prostitute who used sex, witchcraft, and her cunning nature as she aspired to power beyond what was acceptable for a woman both during her lifetime and for a century after her death. At the Battle of Actium, Octavian's armies decisively beat Antony and Cleopatra as Cleopatra's ships abandoned the fight and sailed for Egypt. Antony was able to quickly break free and pursue her with a small fleet of ships. When Octavian's armies were attacking Alexandria, Antony heard a report that Cleopatra had killed herself. He couldn't process the news and collapsed on his sword. It didn't take long for the news to be proved false. Right after Antony passed away. After burying Antony and greeting the triumphant Octavian, Cleopatra locked herself in her room with 2 of her female slaves. The most often stated explanation for Cleopatra's death holds that she passed away from a venomous snake bite, maybe caused by an asp, a tiny viper, or an Egyptian cobra. Hers would have been an especially poetic ending, as the Egyptians connected the cobra with Cleopatra's favorite deity, Isis, and the asp with power. It looks like the real reason behind the queen's death will never be guessed by anyone. There is no surety as whether Cleopatra was murdered by the infamous asp or a smuggled bottle of poison, though because the circumstances surrounding her death remained unknown. Even the soldiers who discovered her dead, all the witnesses that there were, died. The secret was buried with all of them. Cleopatra did leave a mysterious history behind. Being a strong, solid, and independent woman, she was able to accomplish more than women of that time were expected to. No wonder why there are several paintings dedicated to her. Her life is a forever told and famous story in world history. What do you think is the reason behind her death? Was it a conspiracy or just a convenient coincidence? Tell us in the comment section below, and stay tuned because you know it won't be long until we're back with another interesting video. Hey, why not like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss an update?